Hello and welcome to Analog Insights. In today's episode of Talking Cameras, I'm sitting down with Marc Rebillet. Marc is a famous musician and performer, a popular YouTuber with over 2 million subscribers, but also a collector of film cameras. Marc and I got to know each other when he reached out to me asking for recommendations for local camera shops during his latest tour in Europe when he was passing through Munich. He ended up buying a Leica Standard Model E and 35mm f 2.8 Summaron lens that day, and of course we quickly bonded over our joint hobby. So in today's episode we're taking a closer look at Marc's really interesting collection, some selected highlights of that collection, and also his approach to photography, especially when out and about and on tour. Let's get started. Okay, hi Marc. Thank you so much for doing this and joining the show. I really appreciate it. I know you're a busy man and you're currently between tours, and it might feel a little bit awkward to do that because it's an old tradition of Talking Cameras that the guests introduce themselves, but in your case it feels a little bit silly since you have a Wikipedia entry. You're the first one to do that. Nevertheless, I would kindly ask you to say a couple of words of what you're doing, and also most importantly, what is your connection to film cameras?
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you very much for having me, Max. It's pretty cool to even be a part of this community in any way. It makes me very happy. I am not a professional member of this community. I'm a musician by trade. I'm sort of an improvisational one-man show, and I tour around the world. I just got done doing a European tour for about 3 months, and now I'm have a little bit of time off, about a week and a half, before I jump into my North American tour, which will be about a month and a half. So my connection to the world of photography is purely one of passion and interest. I was introduced to film photography about a year and a half ago, and brought my first film cameras with me on tour around that time. Captured my whole sort of touring life from my perspective, and it brought me an enormous amount of joy. And ever since then, I have been obsessively buying film cameras, reading about, learning about, and just loving this whole beautiful world of these ancient, intricate, and beautifully made machines. So that's kind of a little bit about me.
This is super interesting, and you showed me a little bit of your collection before we did this, and I kind of forced you to select 5 cameras that you want to show on the show,
yes.
Which makes it a little bit tricky, but the good thing is for the viewers, I also don't know what you will be showing me, so
that's right.
Let's start with the first camera you picked. I asked you to kind of think in different directions, and now I'm of course super curious what you came up with.
Well, the first camera I've got, which is really, I would say, probably just my favorite overall camera, will not be a huge surprise, I think, to anyone who is familiar with cameras, but it's the Leica M6 TTL from 2001. A really beautiful example of it that I got at the Leica store in Frankfurt. And I also got a version 5 Summaron 50 f2, which is just an incredible piece of glass. It's an amazing camera. What can you say? I mean, it's beautifully built. It functions exactly as you would hope and dream a 35mm rangefinder would. It's just a joy to take pictures with, and the way the Summaron and, of course, other M-mount lenses render scenes and color, and is very special, very unique, and there's a reason that Leica is what it is and has the reputation it does, you know, and that the M6 was really, I have other Leicas, but the M6 is really the camera that made me understand, like, why Leica is the juggernaut that it is in the film camera world.
Yeah. I can completely relate to that. It's very similar to my own setup here. I still use my M6 and the 50mm as the go-to
really?
camera. Is that the same for you? Is that your daily beater, so to speak, or?
Yeah, for the most part, I think I'm also, yeah, when I think about loading film into something, going out and shooting, it's the first camera I will think of. But because I also obsessively buy new pieces of equipment, I tend to use a lot of different cameras. But yeah, as just sort of the gold standard, the thing that I will return to shoot a roll and be sure that in terms of like metering and rendition and that I'm gonna get something really beautiful. It's hard to beat, man. It's just hard to beat. It's such a reliable, perfect little machine. It's just what you're gonna get. I love it so much. I just love it so much. I love winding it. I love the little sensitive. You just know exactly when it's gonna trip. The shutter, you get a half press for the metering, and then that just a little bit more, you're going to get that lovely, smooth little curtain release. It's just the best. It's the best camera.
You're in love, man. I can hear that.
I'm in love. I'm having a love affair with the M6. I really am.
Yeah, great. So what is the next camera that you brought?
Okay, well, the next camera, I'm going to continue in the Leica tradition. Now, I was thinking about my 3F red dial, which is probably, I think if I were to think of the most beautiful, aesthetically speaking, 35 millimeter camera that's ever been made, the 3F is probably right at the top. I mean, just in terms of the way that every single dial and porthole, with the exception of the rangefinder window, is circular, to sort of mimic a 35 millimeter film canister. There's not a single thing on that camera that isn't circular. And it's just a remarkable piece of engineering. I love it very much, but what I think is a more interesting choice is this Leica Standard Model E from 1939 that I got in Munich, which is where you hail from, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, right.
Beautiful town with beautiful Leica finds there, including this incredible example of a Model E that is, has to have been serviced. I think the leatherette must have been replaced, but it's a 1939 model, and we discussed this. It does not have the usual 50 millimeter viewfinder. Instead, it has what I believe is a 35 millimeter viewfinder. So I bought this with an Elmar 5 centimeter, but I have since replaced it with the Summaron 35 f3.5, which now to me this feels like a really complete little kit. And it's just a very special camera. It's everything you need and nothing you don't. There's no focusing mechanism other than your eye, and it just gets out of the way and lets you take photographs. And I really love it. I got a few rolls developed from this when I was using another 35 Summaron. I have not yet gotten a roll developed with this lens, but I just love using it, man. It's very simple. It's just the basics, but it still has that sort of Barnack, that feel to it, which I really like. I like holding this shape, and I like playing with these little knurled dials, that have those little grooves in them where you pull up and change the shutter speed. It's very satisfying to do. So yeah, that's my second pick. I love this thing.
Yeah, I know exactly how you feel about it. I can really relate to that. And
didn't you, when we were talking about it, didn't you say that there would be maybe a reason for them installing a 35 millimeter viewfinder as opposed to a 50?
Yeah, but to be honest, I'm not completely sure what the reason is, and I'm sure the community will know that. So if anybody has an idea, let us know in the comments.
I would love to know.
The best way, instead of going here on the record with something that is maybe wrong, I prefer to just keep quiet on this one.
You're right.
but with respect to your setup, it feels like it also perfectly complements the 50mm M6 setup to just have this kind of 1930s, late 1930s vibe, 35mm setup. As you said, just going out there, zone focusing and enjoying it.
Yeah,
this
100%.
is really cool. And there's a great article over at 35mm Compact, the 35 MMC page
Oh, yes.
by Hamish, that basically argues why everyone should have at least one Oscar Barnack Leica in any sort of way, basically. And I completely agree with that. And
Yeah,
it makes me happy
true.
to see that you bought one.
Yeah, man, I love the
Barnack.
Barnack Leica. I mean, that was my first experience with Leica. Before I had gotten the M6, I had my 3F and just really love shooting that camera. I don't mind the small, focus finding, rangefinder window, and then the composition window. I've got my little 3F right here. I've got the what is it, the VOOC or SMOOC, whatever these lights 5cm viewfinder is. So it's very pleasant to compose on once you've found focus. And they just are very different cameras to the M series. They're very different. They operate differently. They feel different to use, but the quality is still there. The thing that you expect of the Leica family of cameras is still very much a part of the Barnacks, but it's just a different experience. And I wish they would be celebrated more than they are. I think most people that are into Leicas are, it's like M all the way, and they see the Barnacks as like this antique, but they're still very shootable. The family of glass that, all the LTM range of glass is like spectacular and really has its own sort of character to it. And they're fun to shoot. Like I think they're very much worth buying, having, and shooting today. Almost as much as the M's.
Yeah, completely agree. So let's move on to your third camera, and getting more and more curious here.
Yeah, third camera. Let's see. I think I'm gonna go with. Let's get the rangefinders out of the way. So, Canonet QL17, an absolute beast of a fixed lens rangefinder. I have two of these. I have one in chrome. I have this one in black.
The black one is beautiful.
Man, it's a beautiful camera. I mean, first of all, yeah, it just looks great. I love the short focus throw. You can go from infinity to minimum within. It's got to be like 3 inches. It has a self timer. It's aperture priority, shutter priority. And it's just a joy to use. I mean, the only thing I will say, I think the advance lever feels a little bit cheap. I wish it didn't. Also, the shutter release feels a little bit cheap. There's a few components to this camera that don't feel particularly premium, but all that sort of falls away when you develop these photos and see what this 1.7 is it 40 millimeter? Yeah, 40 millimeter 1.7 lens is capable of doing. I mean, it's just a spectacular piece of glass. I mean, I love shooting it just because of the pictures I get out of it. It's very special, and it's not particularly expensive. And for anyone who wants to get into rangefinders in general, I think it's a wonderful entry point. And it's just a great camera to have around. Self-timer. I mean, it's got just about everything you would want, and an incredibly fast, capable lens. What more can you say? Canonet. I mean, it's an amazing camera. Amazing camera.
Yeah. And it also represents that era nicely, right? That era of a lot of compact 40 millimeter lens, built in, as you said, shutter priority or aperture priority. Solutions that still produced excellent results, and until today, and as you said, it's fairly accessible. So it just makes sense to get one if you're curious about rangefinders, especially in the beginning.
Yeah, 100%. I had for a while the Olympus. Is it the 35 R? Not the RC. Is it
RD
the
maybe, or the SP?
SP? The 35 SP.
The bigger one. Mm-hmm.
The bigger one, which I'm not sure if it's a 40, but it's in this family of rangefinders, you know.
Yeah.
And I wasn't as much of a fan. There was the controls were a little too tightly fitted to the lens barrel. I felt it was difficult to sort of get a handle on and change. I can't remember if it was shutter speed or aperture, but this feels a lot better to adjust. I'm not sure if it's just something about the way that they've fitted this around the lens barrel, but it just feels better to use. But yeah, this period of rangefinders is great, where it's just this fixed lens, one-stop solution. Love it. Yeah.
And from your perspective as a collector, it also makes sense to have something like that in the collection. Yeah. Got to.
Yeah.
So tell me about the next camera that you have on your list. And you told me about surprising me. The Canonet was already a surprise, so now I'm curious.
Okay, well, the next one that I have, this is something that I think I'm maybe having the most fun shooting right now, and it's this beautiful Olympus Pen FT.
Ooh.
Man, I just... can I curse? I can't curse, can I?
You shouldn't. You know that.
I effing love this camera. I have it with the again a 40 millimeter, but it's different. It's a different equivalent because it's half frame, but it's the 1.4, and it is a wonderful, wonderful camera to use. I love I don't even know if it's an EV value. It's not. Is it EV value metering?
I'm not sure.
Like it's. Yeah. I don't think it's EV. It's like its own kind of thing where it's just 1 through 7. It's like 0 through 7, and you just get a number, and you get a number in the viewfinder, and you replicate that number on the dial, and then it will pair shutter speed and aperture, basically.
Yeah.
Or rather, maybe it's just choosing No. You choose the shutter speed, and then for some reason, you're just choosing a number up top, but at the bottom you have aperture. You have an aperture setting so it's very bizarre the way it does that. I assume it's doing that so because of the interchangeable lens system that honestly, I don't know why they've chosen to do that, but it doesn't really matter because it works. You set the number on the lens barrel, and then you have your aperture set. I love the shutter speed dial on the front of the body. It's very clicky, feels really satisfying to set shutter speed, and the whole the fact. Is this a Maitani design?
Yes.
It's a really ingenious SLR design. I've never seen anything like it. And the shutter mechanism, the snap, is very satisfying. And also, the thing that I think I love the most about it is that I don't have to think so much about shooting in terms of being precious with the shots, because you have 70 some odd. I got 77 shots out of my last roll. And so it's just, you just shoot. I can take 3 different versions of the same picture with slightly different framing to try and get the right shot. And I really love this camera a lot more than I thought I would. I got it because I really like this era of Olympus design. They were just making really sort of risky, interesting choices.
Yes.
And this might be my favorite thus far. I mean, it's just, it's a really cool camera.
And you just briefly mentioned that shooting away. Are you the kind of person using that also creatively? Because, many people go for triptychs, or other people deliberately go for grainy film because they have the smaller negative and just push HP5 and have really
to get just
artsy results. Yeah.
I haven't really messed with it in a really artistic way yet. I've shot several rolls through it, but mainly just shooting box speed. And, you know, obviously the sharpness is nothing to write home about, but that's kind of part of the charm, I think, is it has this slightly soft texture to it that gives it a vintage sort of, it's rendering. It's really, really nice. And the fact that you can have such a fast lens on here, I mean, there's no other half frame that comes close to the kind of performance, right, that this offers. Like, I don't think. Yeah, it's a special system, so I really, really like having it. Yeah, I do need to try this sort of diptych, triptych thing where people are doing long with the cut, you frame the multiple frames on a thing, but I haven't gotten there yet. Maybe one day.
Cool.
Yeah.
And I can relate to that as well. The half frame vibe, and sometimes I just take my very small Olympus Pen with me on trips.
Oh,
and
yeah.
people ask me, why do you do this? I mean, it's a super tiny camera, a solid lens, but by far not as good as what you're having here.
Yeah.
And I also have a cupboard full of cameras, and I could do other things, right?
Right.
And yet I'm sometimes just drawn to these very specific half frame look, and also the portrait by default, right? This is also interesting.
That's a really nice thing. It makes you think about framing things differently. Normally, you know, obviously, I think most of our instincts is to frame landscape, and you know, if something catches my eye and might look good framed portrait, I'll do it that way. But this, I mean, the whole roll, I think I maybe shoot 1 or 2 landscape shots. The whole roll, I'm looking through this lens and going, well, that does kind of look interesting this way. So it forces your brain into a different way of thinking about composition. Yeah, you're right. That's another very special thing about it. The pen, the original pen, is that is the selenium cell, right?
Not even. It doesn't have anything.
Really?
The original one, you can actually look up the review on our channel. My tiny design, super simple and clean, and you basically have to go with the Sunny 16 rule for correct exposure. And it's super small, super tiny, and only later on they integrated these selenium light meters because they were needed, of course.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Okay, so much about the Olympus Pen. What is the next one that you brought?
Well, the next one is a classic, and this is the ever beautiful Hasselblad 500 cm with the Zeiss planar 80 millimeter f2.8. Just what can you say? I mean, one of the greatest cameras ever built. I mean, ever built. It's just every time I get a roll back from this thing, the romanticism of the rendering is such an elegant fall off, highlights, shadows. It's smooth, incredibly sharp, a depth to the to the colors and to the field of view, or rather the depth of field. There's just such a I'm not going to add anything to what people have already said about this camera, and people who have shot it already know. I mean, it's like it's just one of the best. It's an amazing camera to shoot. Even just to take out, I have it on a strap. I take it out and meter by eye, and it's just a blast, man. It's a blast. I love this thing so much. I will never sell it. Yeah, 500 cm.
So is this something that you take out on special occasions, or is it rather something that you also occasionally use as your go-to camera as an alternative to the M6? So whenever it needs to be
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll take it out. Usually, if I'm going out to just shoot, if I'm on the road and I'm going out for a day, I'll just take one camera to keep myself focused. You know, so I'll either choose medium format or 35, and yeah, if I'm taking out the 500 cm, I'll just take that. And I also have right now I have the regular, I believe it's the A12 back on it, but I also have a 645 back for it that, and
Nice.
the sort of viewfinder tool that, so you can compose properly. And I really love having that kind of versatility on this system, not to mention the system as a whole is incredibly versatile. But yeah, I mean, it's just a very special camera. But even just utilizing it is such a treat. You know, that the thwack of the mirror flipping, like, I mean, it's just such a dramatic experience using it and just taking an exposure and cranking it forward another way. The whole thing is just magical. It's yeah, man. It's a legendary camera for a reason, for sure.
And are you only using it with the 80 millimeter, the standard lens, or do you have others in your collection?
So far, yes. I would love more glass. I was reading about 100 millimeter. Is that right?
The macro or?
Yeah, maybe. There was one that I have my eye on. I can't quite remember which. Do you have any recommendations for a second piece of glass?
All sorts of recommendations. I'll
Oh,
shoot you an
really?
email afterwards.
Please.
That's fine. Yeah, and in general, you cannot go wrong. And as you mentioned, the system is so interesting, and you can do so much with it that
Right.
it is quite an investment to go for glass as well for the Hasselblad, as you know, and the prices keep going up. It's like investing
Yeah.
in stocks in some cases, without the prices ever going down.
Right. It's just a constant climb.
But once you have a certain set, it's really interesting and really rewarding. Yeah. And as always, when you ask somebody to only bring 5 cameras and to make a pick of top 5, people end up breaking the rules. So you
Yes.
told me earlier that you might have brought another one, and at least that's supposedly a surprise. So
Yes, I brought another one, and it's a janky thing. It's the Lomo LC-A Plus.
ooh, interesting.
The LC-A Plus. I would love to get my hands on an LCM, on the original Soviet LCM that this was really most closely modeled after. But for now, just using the LC-A Plus, I adore this camera. The Minotaur 2.8 32 is a very, very special piece of glass. I think it's just 3-element construction, but the metering is very reliable. I think outside of like high contrast scenes, if if there's some intense backlighting, it might get confused a little bit, but otherwise, it does a really excellent job metering and getting out of your way. And I feel like as just sort of a run and gun thing where I love also the sliding mechanism is just wonderful. And I know it's even cooler on the originals, but I adore this camera, particularly just because of the way the photographs look. Using it is kind of the same as using any other, point and shoot, for lack of a better. It's, I mean, outside of the fact that you're doing light zone focusing, the way the pictures look is very unique, and I think there's a reason it's like the go-to like Lomo camera, because it really has a very specific look. The vignetting is there, but it's not so harsh that it turns it into sort of like a toy camera look. If you focus correctly, it's very sharp in the center and sort of begins to distort as you go out towards the edges. And I just love it. I love the way it looks. If you nail focus, you really get some super, super interesting shots. So yeah, just got this one recently and have been thrilled with the results.
I can only agree to what you just said, and you might know this. There's also a Leica M mount version of only this lens, of this Minotaur.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Yes, I saw that like a few days ago.
Yeah. And
Is
by the way,
it well built? Is it like a well built
And it's surprisingly well built, and I'm currently in the process of reviewing that lens. So it's lying over there, and I just took it out today and already got my first rolls back for that review. And
how does it look?
Just as you described, it's very interesting, and of course there will be more details in the review. But they really managed to pull that off to bring the same characteristic and the same look that you just described to the Leica M mount system, or any digital mirrorless camera, by the way.
Oh, that's amazing.
And it's a really interesting lens, as you said, for situations where you don't need to have perfectly clean lines and so on, because it does distort. But you do want to have a certain character in it that is interesting but not trashy, for lack of a better word.
That's exactly what it is. It doesn't feel like an Instagram filter. It just feels slightly high contrast, slightly saturated. I really like what it does to colors. It's really a great lens. I mean, I think wait, so the M mount version, is it rangefinder coupled?
Yes, it is. So you do still have these 4 steps that is also comes with in the original, but you can also go in between. So you have these steps, but you can still use the rangefinder. You have the 35mm frame lines on an M6 that are roughly close to the 32. So in the beginning, to me, it always happened that I had things in my composition that I didn't want to be there.
Right.
But once you get used to it, you'd understand. Okay, you need to
frame a little tight,
Exactly. But it's actually a lot of fun to use, and it's tiny, right? You have the same effect on an M. The M looks comparatively large, of course.
Right.
But since you have the original, just stick to that. It's a great choice.
Oh, cool. Wait, does Lomo sell that? Is it a Lomo product?
It's a lomography lens. Yeah.
I'm probably going to get it. I really need to know what that feels like. That's very cool.
Great. Okay, so much about the cameras, and you briefly touched on that in the beginning, but I'm super curious about how you got into film photography. You're a little bit younger than myself, and we've talked about that before. We're kind of the generation that grew up with digital and only occasionally had touch points with film photography. And for you, I would be just curious, how did you become such a nerd for film cameras? Yeah.
Well, when I think about it now, it makes a lot of sense, because as a small child, my dad was constantly taking pictures of me. I mean, constantly. And I would really love to know what cameras he used. My mom doesn't remember, but it would bring me a lot of joy. So I need to look through our albums and see if anyone has taken pictures of him taking pictures. I would really like to know what he was using. I assume it was a variety of point and shoots, but I'm not sure. In any event, I have a lot of memories of cameras in general in my past, film cameras. But a couple years ago, I was performing a show out on the street here in Manhattan. And after I was done, someone stopped me and asked if they could take my picture. I said, of course, posed for a couple shots, and a few days later, he tagged me in one of these shots that I thought looked really amazing, particularly good, and I didn't know why, and I asked him what he used to take my picture, and he told me that he had used a film camera. Now I know it was a Contax TVS, which is a great little camera. And it just intrigued me. The look, the way that it had rendered a scene was just interesting to me for whatever reason. So I started to read about it. And then I don't know what happened, but I just got sucked in. I went to a great place here in New York called PhotoCare on 22nd and 6th, if anyone is in the city. Amazing place. If you shoot film, you already know about it. But they have a rotating collection of film cameras. And I talked to a guy, Anthony, there about film photography, and he sort of guided me towards what was my first camera, which is the legendary Olympus XA. Perfect entryway into the film camera world. A little bit of manual control, rangefinder mechanism, awesome camera, great little Zuiko lens. And yeah, anyway, after I bought that, it has been a steady, I just have not stopped being able to buy equipment until this very day. And yeah, it's been a love affair.
And this is interesting because once you start buying cameras, at which point did you consider yourself a collector, and how conscious are your buying decisions?
Well, that's interesting that you asked that, because I think the only the only time I considered myself a collector was when you asked me if I was. You know, I said, look, I've got a ton of camera, because I approached you and just said that I love your content, I love your reviews and the thoughtfulness and clearly the experience and knowledge that goes into all of your work, and just wanted to let you know that. But you know, when you asked me if I would be interested in doing an episode of this, and if I considered myself a collector, then I had to sort of think about it. I was like, am I? And I mean, I think by definition, I probably am. I have a rather large collection of film cameras, and I do think about, the decisions to buy what and when and for what reason are very conscious. I spend a lot of time reading about these various families of products, various manufacturers, and you know, it so happens now, I know that, you know, when you're looking at a particular model, it's likely that it's sort of a part of a release of several models that they all have some sort of similarity. You know, it's like the Rollei 35, 35S, 35 to, you know, it's all of these cameras that are part of like a family of cameras that share similar characteristics. And I like picking and purchasing the camera from within that family that best represents it, or that fulfills sort of my desires most closely. So that's kind of what you'll find in my collection are, you know, examples of a family of releases that are, to me, the coolest or the most interesting, etc.
That, to me, sounds like the perfect definition of a camera collector.
Okay, cool. I guess I am. I guess I am.
And moving away from the gear and more towards what you're doing with it, you also briefly mentioned that in the beginning, that you use it a lot on tour. So if you have a day off in between shows, you go out and shoot. And I would just be very curious, as a musician doing something completely different most of the time, how do you approach photography, and which role does it play in your day-to-day life and on tour?
Yeah, I think my approach to photography is very much that of a hobbyist, in terms of, you know, I enjoy mostly capturing moments in my life that, you know, I have the privilege of living a somewhat unusual and exciting life right now. And it's really brings me a lot of joy to be able to capture that in a way that is interesting and fun for me, and that also allows me to remember these moments in my life that I otherwise would not, because I have very poor capacity for detail retention. And so having this this beautiful smorgasbord of visual moments captured helps me to remember these nights, these days, these cities, people who I would never have remembered otherwise, who I might have spent a couple hours with after a show, you know, but we had a really good time. And I get to remember that through these beautiful machines. And it also allows me to satisfy my natural curiosity for small gadgets, which has been an interest of mine since before I got into film photography. Before this, it was mobile technology, cell phones, which for a number of years was going through a really interesting sort of period of year over year iteration and progression, introducing a lot of new interesting technology to cell phones. Now I feel like it's kind of plateaued, but anyway, that's how I approach it. In terms of actually taking photographs, I would say it's pretty basic. I'm not doing anything super artistic. I'm really mainly just capturing moments, you know.
And here I would be interested in that. Is it also something for you to switch off a little bit and just let yourself go? Because I understand on stage you're really improvising for 2 hours at a time, in front of really large audiences, kind of interacting with the crowds and so on. And this must be very tricky or very difficult to do. You're working with loop stations and all the tricky stuff that is out there in terms of music, and then you just take this very lo-fi device, for instance the Hasselblad, and go out there on a day off and take a couple of images. And to me this sounds like finding a balance between something that is very demanding and something that is just relaxing and creative in a very different way.
That's interesting. I had not thought about it in that way, but I think you are absolutely right. It's very therapeutic in terms of switching off a little bit, or rather, it's switching the brain. It's putting the brain in a different place.
Yeah, this puts it better. Yeah.
You know, because I do like thinking about the images. I do like mostly having manual control and going through that process, which requires some thought, I suppose. But yeah, you're right. It's just different, and it's really, really nice. It is relaxing. So yeah, I think that is a big element. I think you're right. I had not thought about it that way, though. Yeah.
That's great. So thank you so much for your time. I really, really enjoyed our conversation, and yeah, I'm just grateful that you jumped at the opportunity. And
oh, Max, it's the pleasure is mine. I am honored that you asked me as a somewhat of an outsider to this world. It's really nice to be able to connect with you and share my love for these little things. They're just the coolest, and it makes me really happy to see that they have that they're really taking the stage again. They're very popular now, which is really cool. They deserve it, you know.
Yeah. So thanks for your time. Really appreciate it, and yeah, hope to talk to you soon.
Definitely talk to you soon, Max. Thanks, man.
Bye. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this conversation between Marc Rebillet and myself, and got to know him a little bit better and his camera collection. Maybe you also get inspired to take a look at certain cameras. As always, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please don't forget to like it and maybe even subscribe to our channel. Jules, Greg, and I really appreciate each and every subscriber coming our way. So thanks for watching. I hope to see you soon. Bye.